Hello and welcome back to TFB channel. Most of you are here for the story and not the hype. And today we are going to talk about a rather interesting story. We are going to talk about this car. I know it's hyped in some countries, not so much in some others. In India, it's still on the pegs. Some of you have probably already bought one of these, or you are still on the fence on whether you should buy it or not, or you have completely decided not to buy it at all. But no matter which side you're on, I urge you to watch this story all the way till the end because it is rather interesting. It's not only about the car, it's not only about the driver, it's about a lot of things that came together in 1984, and which is what makes this story really interesting. Germany is at the heart of it, so if you want, pour yourself a cold one, get some fries or maybe some sausages, I don't know, munch on whatever you enjoy, but this is going to be a long story, but a very interesting one. So as always, please watch it all the way till the end. Now, have you watched the movie Rush? If you haven't, please add it to your watch list. You will enjoy every moment of it. Well, almost. Those of you who have watched it would remember that disastrous accident Niki Lauda had at the Nürburgring Nordschleife. Nordschleife simply means the Northern Loop, and it is considered even today to be one of the most dangerous racetracks. Some of you might remember that track from the little story that we did with the Ferrari Transporter. I went all the way to the Nürburgring to shoot that. But the Nürburgring is like a pilgrimage for a lot of people, but it is, till date, like I said, one of the most dangerous tracks around the world. It almost claimed Niki Lauda's life. It almost burnt him alive. And that incident was enough for the FIA, for Formula One to say, okay, we are not coming back to the Nürburgring. However, Germany did not want that to happen. They addressed the concern that Formula One or the FIA had with the Nordschleife. So what they did back then in the early 80s was redid the entire section around the old start-finish straight of the Nordschleife and built a new track around it. A shorter track, of course, not as long as the Nordschleife, but this was the new GP circuit. This would host new Grand Prix races, and they lured Formula One to come back to the Nürburgring. This was in 1984. In the October of 84 is when they found time on the Formula One calendar to resume Formula One racing at the Nürburgring. But this is time when we had no social media, no internet. So they wanted to create news about Formula One coming back to Nürburgring. They wanted to show off this new GP track to the whole world. So they wanted to do something that would create a splash, create that bang. And therefore they decided to have some sort of a really good exhibition race. Now, of course, they could have looked at their own DTM races, probably got some of their celebrated German drivers to come and race on that new circuit and show off to the German crowd. But that would have been a very localized event, so to say. They wanted to go global. Nürburgring wanted global audience for this. So of course you had newspapers, you had television back there, but that wasn't enough to show off the new facility, the new circuit. They wanted global audience to come in and watch this, see the facilities, use them. That is why they decided to have an exhibition race. That would not only help get the word out globally, but it would also help them do sort of a dry run before the actual Formula One came back in October of 1984. Now, around the same time, Mercedes-Benz had a new car, the 190E. And they were betting big on this car. This was aimed at the younger, enthusiastic audience. It was a family car, but one that could also at the same time hit the racetrack, be really sporty in its driving dynamics. So Mercedes-Benz thought this would be a great opportunity for them to be a part of this exhibition race somehow and showcase that 190E to the audience. They would have had their target audience right there. So Mercedes-Benz thought this would be a great opportunity to do a one-make race with the new 190E. But that was pretty challenging because you see the race format that was proposed by Nürburgring and maybe even Mercedes was a race of the champions. They wanted to bring Formula One car drivers or champions from different eras, from different nationalities, from different brands even to come and compete in one single race. And Mercedes-Benz wanted their car to be the equal hardware amongst all of these. Now, if you watched Rush, if you watched Drive to Survive or any other Formula One documentary, or if you follow motorsport, you would know that race car drivers may be great friends off the track, but on the track, they are the fiercest of rivals. Their egos peak taller than Mount Everest even. So getting these kind of drivers, champions at that, to come and drive one brand of car, now that would be monumental, wouldn't it? A big challenge. But Mercedes Benz was honestly the only one who could actually pull it off. You know why? It's rather interesting. So, back in that era, Mercedes Benz would offer their cars to Formula One car drivers at a discounted rate, irrespective of your nationality, the team that you were racing for, or when you raced in Formula One. As long as you were a Formula One driver, you could walk into any Mercedes Benz dealership, buy whichever Mercedes Benz car you wanted at a very discounted rate. Let me remind you, we are talking about an era when F1 wasn't as glamorous as it is today. The driver salaries weren't as high as they are today. So, being able to buy a luxury car from Mercedes Benz at a discounted rate, that certainly was a very big deal. And that gave most Formula One drivers and their teams a soft corner for this brand. Now, most Formula One drivers that they approached said yes to this one make race. There were a few exceptions, of course. Like, for example, Nelson Piquet, who was the reigning world champion at the time, said, "No, I'm not racing." Sir Jackie Stewart had already taken an oath that he had given up on racing after that tragic accident involving one of his close friends. So he wouldn't race either. Mario Andretti was qualifying for Indy 500 that time, so he was not available for the race. That said, it still had a lot of celebrated names on the grid, 20 cars. Names like Sterling Moss, K.K. Rosberg, James Hunt, Niki Lauda, Alan Prost, even the rookie Ayrton Senna. Just gives me goosebumps even thinking about that. So many celebrated names, and compared to all of that, this guy was the underdog. In fact, Mercedes Benz, after they had managed to convince so many Formula One drivers to come and do the one make race in a Mercedes Benz, they had that leverage to be able to recommend Ayrton Senna's name. Otherwise, he had no chance of being on that celebrated grid because back then, all that he had to his name was a Formula 3 championship, the Macau Grand Prix victory, and he was fairly new to Formula 1. So getting him to race amongst such a celebrated, decorated crowd wasn't going to be easy. But because Mercedes Benz had pulled off that feat of getting all these drivers to drive their new car in a one make series, well, the commission agreed and they allowed Senna to be on the grid. And I think that was the biggest moment of this race. Now, it definitely drew in a lot of crowds. The attention, the eyes were never on this guy at all. But it did get the word going that, okay, there is going to be the race of the champions. The world hadn't seen anything like it before. And that Nürburgring was coming back to Formula One. So it drew in a lot of crowds. There was a lot of media attention as well. So much so that Niki Lauda was so busy doing his TV interviews and his TV commitments that he found very little time to actually go for the qualifying, which put him 14th on the grid out of those 20. Alan Prost was the pole sitter for the race. In fact, the TV interviews, the TV commitments, they went on for so long on race day with all the speeches from all the guests, etc., that they actually forgot to air or didn't have time to air the start of the race. And that was a bit of a controversial moment because in the first lap, in the first corner itself, Alan Prost and Ayrton Senna had an incident. And that sent Alan Prost to a few places down. It gave Senna the lead, and Alan Prost says that he got the lead and he never gave it back. Alan Prost claims that Senna messed with him in that corner just to get that lead somehow. But if you look at it from Senna's point of view, he had a point to prove. He was racing against the best of the best, the cream. So he had to prove a point. He had to win that race no matter what. So he gave it his all. He went for it. And well, he actually ended up winning that race. Niki Lauda, who started from 14th on the grid, finished second. So arguably, maybe he was the better driver that day, but the top step of the podium was claimed by Senna. Alan Prost, in fact, had another incident with another driver which made him race with the back of the field, so he was nowhere to be seen. Of course, he got his revenge later when the Formula One actually happened in the October of 1984. Alan Prost won, and Senna didn't even finish. But the Monaco GP that followed after this race of champions, Senna, in torrential rain, in absolutely dangerous driving conditions, actually ended up winning the race. So the victory at the race of the champions and then the Monaco, it immediately cemented that Senna was a driver to be taken very seriously. He had beaten the best of the best in an equal playing field thanks to the 190E. So like I said, this story is rather interesting. This race was very important because this is where Ayrton Senna finally made his mark. And we all know how it went from there on. Now, this race also helps cement the fact that the 190E was an absolute monster. It looked gorgeous for a family car, a typical luxury Mercedes-Benz, but at the same time, it proved its mettle on the track, which is what gave it a great success even at the markets. And Mercedes-Benz didn't stop there. While Senna won the race winning car was then transferred to the Mercedes-Benz Museum in Stuttgart. And it is still there. So if you manage to make a trip to Stuttgart and visit the Mercedes-Benz Museum, you will see the real race winning car out there with the Senna lettering on it and the number 11 on it. But it doesn't end there. The second car, which Niki Lauda won in, that car was actually sold. In fact, I think it's changed many hands now, and currently it is with another collector in Europe, and that is still in its race spec. But Senna would feel shortchanged, right? The car that he won in is actually with the museum. So to avoid that from happening, Mercedes-Benz actually gifted him another car in a race spec. That, however, was a metallic black. Now, interestingly, Mini GT has done something really awesome. They've created this 20 car set, which is the Race of the Champions set. It has all the 20 cars, 10 golden, 10 black, with all those race car driver names and their numbers as they appeared on the actual race. And you can have that entire set. It does cost a fortune, but if you love this story, if you love motorsport, if you love the fact that something like this happened back in the 80s, I think that would be a great set to have. It's a future collectible. Or if you don't have space for 20 190 years, well, what you can get yourself is this car. You can also get yourself a black one, but Ayrton Senna loved that car so much, the 190E, that he actually ended up buying a street spec version of that in the same color that he won in. So he had the same golden color car in a street spec without the 11 or without the lettering on it. So that could be another nice customization for you. Get one more of these, get rid of all these decals and all the lettering on it, and then you have a car that was very similar to the street spec car that Ayrton Senna had. So that three car set would be an awesome one to have. The race winning car, the one that was awarded to Senna, and the one that Senna actually bought. Now, the one that he bought, I think he used it for about a couple of years and then sold it off, put about 20,000 miles on it, and he sold it off just before he made the move to the McLaren racing team. But like I said, his greatness in a way really shone in that race of champions. So you could either get yourself that entire set or make this three car set that I just spoke of. And this car is actually different than the 190E in silver color that Mini GT released just a few weeks back, because this one is the Evolution 2, while this is the first one. This is the 2.3. This is a 2.3 liter engine. The dash 16 in the name stands for the 16 wall or the 4 wall per cylinder configuration that this car came with. And this one is the next version of it, the Evolution 2. Now this, like I said, because of that race became an instant hit. It became a famous car even on the racetrack. It became famous even at the DTM races. And compared to the street spec car, this one was lowered, ran stiffer suspension. It even ran a smaller steering wheel for racing, of course. It also had a roll cage inside it. So unfortunately, as of now, Mini GT doesn't make the original 190E, but once they do, I think this will be quite good, and we'll have to see if this one actually sits a little lower than the street spec if they decide to build one. But like I said, this is going to be different than the Evo 2 that they released just a little while back. So if you've got yourself this and say, okay, come on, I have this, I have some of the other previous releases that Mini GT did with the 190, why do I need this one? Well, you do need this one because this is actually different. And you will also see that the copyright, there are two copyrights on this car. One is from Mercedes-Benz for using the car name and the color and all the details, of course. And the other is from Senna Brands 2025 that you see written down below. That's because to be able to use the Senna name anywhere or the racing number or even the Senna logos, Mini GT or any scale model maker needs a different license for it, a separate license for it. In fact, you'll also see that licensing information right behind the blister. You will also see it here on the box. So that is that additional licensing that you need to do to use any of these logos. And Mini GT, as always, has made sure it has all the licenses in place. And I'm sure it would be just as difficult with the other race cars that they may have put in that 20 car set, because all these are celebrated drivers. All of them may have their own trusts or organizations or, their own copyright requirements. I'm sure Mini GT has gone through the pains of all of that. So for that factor, along with that the story that I just told you. I think that 20 car set really makes sense. But I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, let me know in the comments. Consider giving us a like and a share. I know it's a long story, so I really thank you if you've hung around all the way till the end. And before we go, let's do a quick giveaway. If you can tell me what was that one reason that helped Mercedes-Benz convince all of those Formula One drivers to take part in that one make series, let me know in the comments below. I'll pick out a winner from all the correct answers and we could do a giveaway with one Mercedes-Benz scale model. Thank you so much for watching this one. Until the next one, take care, drive safe, and don't forget to follow.